the Pediatric Lounge, a podcast taking you behind the door of the physician's lounge to get a deeper insight into just what docs are talking about today. From the clinically profound to the wonderfully routine and everything in between. Physician Computer Company. PCC empowers independent pediatricians, streamlining daily operations and improving financial stability. A trusted pediatric partner for 40 years, we offer award-winning support, personalized training, seamless data transitions, and practice analytics. With inclusive pricing, a lively peer community, and a free annual users conference, you can focus on what matters the most, your patients. Explore more at pcc.com. That is pcc.com. Pediatric Executive Development System, or PEDS, is a dynamic, transformative program designed to accelerate the growth and development of the leaders in the field of pediatric entrepreneurship. PEDS takes a hands-on approach to problem solving, addressing real-time situations within your organization. More than a theoretical course, it is a practical platform that accelerates learning. Look at our link on the show notes for more information. Good morning, George. It's Tuesday morning again. We're with another fabulous guest today on the podcast.
Yes, we are. Today we have Dr. Igor Trogan, and his topic today is going to be the advantages and disadvantages of being a sole owner of a large medical practice. And we're going to talk about everything private practice.
Igor, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Harold. Thank you, George. I'm excited to be here.
Yep.
Igor, we always start out first by asking, why did you become a pediatrician?
I always wanted to be a physician. My grandmother was a nurse, and I did a lot of volunteering in high school. In medical school, I really gravitated towards pediatrics. It's one of those things that you want to do it when you go on your first pediatric rotation. I enjoyed working with kids. I found I didn't enjoy working or treating adults. So it just came in very naturally for me.
You know what? It's very interesting. Every doctor you ask this question to, it's the same story.
Mm-hmm.
It's always the same story.
It's instantly, I would say within a few days of a rotation, whether pediatrics is for you or not.
Yeah. The sad part of today is that I have medical students, and I have yet to meet one that wants to go into pediatrics.
That's not true.
Just the one that you have.
Okay.
That's the only one. I'm talking
Okay.
about my medical students.
And she's got 177 on their list of her. So they are out there. Igor, you have a very interesting life story. You were actually born in the old Soviet Union.
Yes.
And yes.
And so I left former Republic of Moldova when I was 5. I lived in Athens, Greece for 7 years, and I arrived in New York City when I was 13.
Wow.
And when you say the Republic of Moldova, is that the Moldova today or the Romanian Moldova?
It's the Moldova Republic today, so the
Moldova.
capital Chisinau.
Yes. You ever go back?
No, I have not had a chance to go back since I left.
Do you have any recollections of the communist world, or you're too young?
Very few fleeting images. Most of my recollections are from growing up in Greece. That was a very good experience.
Nice. And so then you did your medical school here, and you joined a established medical practice at a residency.
Correct. During residency, I knew I didn't want to go into, I know I didn't want to be an academic practice owner. I always knew that I wanted to join a group and just basically be an employee. I did residency at the Young Behavioral Children's Hospital, and it was a pretty difficult residency. My wife vividly recalls when she mentioned to me, why would I don't have a practice? No, I want to have a regular job, 40 hours a week, not have to worry about anything. So I joined a very large group in central New Jersey where I worked for a year and a half.
And what precipitated your desire to change and open up your own office at that point?
So it was a very large group that had multiple locations. At that time, everybody was using paper charts. That was back in 2004. And patients used to go from office location to location. Their chart never used to follow them. So every time you had to see a patient, basically had to start from scratch. Also, that group had a lot of partners, and going to some of the partner meetings, you could see that not many things could be accomplished because everybody had their own point of view and ideas of how the practice should do things. At that time, I said to myself, I can do this. So I started reading a lot about private practice from medical economics. The American Academy of Family Physicians had a lot of information. So I just started doing reading and decided to go solo a year and a half after finishing residency.
Do you regret having gone solo?
No, I think it definitely suits my personality. I know what I want to accomplish. And it was very hard in the beginning because I decided to open in an area that I thought would be a big demand for pediatricians, especially somebody who speaks Russian. But unfortunately, the area was very saturated with physicians. So it took quite a few years, I would say at least 4 or 5, until I could make it into a successful business.
So what'd you do in the meanwhile to sustain your life? You probably had a kid, a wife, a house.
Absolutely. So I opened my practice the day after my first child, my son, was born. And I quickly realized that it would take years to build a practice. So I joined the hospital as a pediatric emergency room doctor. And I did that for 5 years. So I was working 2 nights a week, 12-hour shifts, overnight, while working full-time in my practice. So I joked that my residency was not 3 years, it was more like 8 years.
Yes.
So I was basically Q3 and a half every week for 5 years.
I guess what they say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Obviously, it was a great learning experience. And it was a very good way to build up a practice because patients with an emergency room, they liked your practice, they liked your style of medicine, best type of practice. And I said, that's how we slowly grew.
Wow. And so you learned a lot. What would you say are as advice to people starting their own practice today not to do?
I would say, first, you need to do your market research and you need to know how saturated the area is. You have to, if there's no pediatricians in town, you have a much better chance of succeeding. If there are multiple pediatricians, it's going to be an uphill battle to build up enough of a patient base to make it a successful business. It will take years and years. You have to look at other sources of income while you're trying to make it succeed. The problem is that when parents move to the area or when parents ask, who's your pediatrician, they always ask the neighbor or the friends who already have an established doctor. So you're at a huge disadvantage when you're starting from scratch. You have to differentiate yourself from other practices. And it takes a while until you have enough of a patient base that can refer you to their friends and neighbors. I think my advice to new graduates would be, see if you could join a solo practitioner, somebody who's looking to retire, or a small group, maybe 2 or 3 providers. They might be looking for somebody young who is going to join their practice, take it over from them. I think that would be a much easier and also much more secure way of doing it.
But you know what, Igor? That's the old school way of doing things. All right. So there's going to be some kind of monetary money exchange or some kind of something. But the message on the street is that practices have no value. So I think that discourages physicians.
Which is absolutely false.
I know.
That is absolutely false. And there's a reason why a lot of venture capital are going into pediatrics, because they realize there's a huge value in medical practices, especially pediatric practices, which are significantly undervalued nowadays. The amount of money that you have to pay to buy a private pediatric practice is significantly less than if you are going to touch a dental practice or any other similar type of business that has similar gross revenue. So I think if you're a recent graduate who's thinking of having their own practice, I will look into the community and see if there are any solo doctors that are looking to retire. I think they'll be so excited to have you join them. That way you can learn, you have a mentor, and you can see how things are done to see if this is something for you. It's a big commitment of having your own private practice. Some people make it seem as though it's very easy, as though anybody can do it. And it's similar to baseball. Everybody can play baseball, but not everybody can play minor leagues or major leagues. It takes years of experience, hard work to make it a successful business,
right,
and not a hobby that eventually fails.
So right now, everybody's talking about this DPC model, and that's like private practice with cash, right?
That's right.
I don't get that. I really, because the logistics and the things that have to happen is exactly the same thing.
No, it's a lot different, but
Not really.
yeah, unfortunately, pediatrics, if you're on with insurances, is solely a volume business.
All right.
If you go DPC and you're actually paid what we deserve to be paid, then it no longer becomes a volume business.
Okay.
So you're not pushing to see 25 kids a day, 7 days a week. You're pushing to see 5, 6 kids a day, and you spend the time that they need, and you solve a lot of problems over the phone. But they're paying a lot more than the insurance company is going to pay you. So it's not for everybody, but it's a free market. It's another way of doing things. I have friends in Miami who have concierge pediatricians. They pay him $3,000 up front at the beginning of the year for the first child and $2,000 for the second. And he's a very limited practice, a pediatrician does. But if your kid's sick, he comes to your house. You text him. He says, "You want me to take a look at Johnny?" "Yeah, would you please? I think his ears are infected." "Sure, I'll be there in 15 minutes. He comes up, he looks at the kid. The mom doesn't have to leave the house with the 2 kids. And
But he does that through telemedicine, not in person.
No, he does it in person.
Yeah,
I don't believe it. I don't believe it.
He covers just a small section of South Beach. That's
Mhm.
all he does.
But
That's for the ultra wealthy. That's not your average parent. But
Mhm.
that's another model. It's okay. There's got to be different models.
and Herc, with that model, you're always on call. You always at somebody's
Beck and call.
exactly. Call you in the middle of the night. You have to get up out of bed, visit them in their home, because otherwise, if the one time you refuse them, they're going to drop you.
Yeah, talk about work-life balance.
Correct.
I
So
like my balance.
everybody is different, right? And if you do the math, if they're paying you $3,000 per kid, you got 100 kids in the practice, which is nothing, right? Nothing compared to a panel of 1,800 kids or 3,000 kids. You're making $300,000 with no overhead. Just your malpractice.
I don't know.
But it's not for everybody, and you have to be in the right neighborhood. That's not going to happen in a immigrant-based neighborhood where there are food stamps and Medicaid. You're not going to find 5 patients who can pay that. So they're different models. But what are the disadvantages or challenges of being the solo owner of a big empire like yours versus being like a large group practice or practice without walls?
The advantages, let's start with that. If you have a clear vision, you know what you want to do, you can accomplish things fairly quickly. As I said, my experience of working with a large group and also seeing how other groups operate. Usually, if you have multiple partners, sometimes, their goals are not in alignment with yours. Some of them might be nervous and expanding or doing things differently. But a large group with multiple partners is like a marriage. We've all heard about stories where, some of those large groups can become very dysfunctional or they break apart. So there are definitely disadvantages. If an opportunity presents itself or something that needs to be done, it happens within 24 hours. It doesn't happen through weeks and weeks of meetings and going back and forth. The disadvantages, obviously, just because you're solo, everything stops you. So you have to make all the decisions. Sometimes you have to rely on yourself, bounce off ideas. I mean, obviously, you have support groups and colleagues that you can ask for advice, but ultimately, you're the one responsible for the large organization. There are definitely challenges. You're on vacation. When I travel, I don't travel with one laptop. I usually travel with two laptops just in case my one laptop dies or I always need to have access to what's happening. But I enjoy it. I enjoy knowing what's happening at all times in my practice, in my offices. My supervisors, my practice administrator always have access to me. And I like not only the medical aspect of pediatrics, but I like business aspect as well too. I find it very challenging. Enjoy.
Well, Igor, I admire you. I'm going to push back a little bit though on this, because we're like the same person, but I just have a good marriage, I guess.
Yep.
I'm afraid as you lose partners for your retirement, you could end up being the only one, which is fine.
Yeah.
But I don't like, I've told you this many times. I don't like walking around with a target on my back. I want to have people around me to help deflect some of the problems. Like, it's just really hard because you have a big if you have 17 doctors working for you, you got a big shop. You got 17 personalities, human resources, PCMH stuff, billing stuff, training stuff, payroll stuff, pension stuff, insurance stuff, contract negotiation stuff. The employed physicians, they just clock in, clock out, see a patient, go home.
Yes.
So I like partners, but the partners, they all have to do. If we stumble upon an opportunity, I'll analyze and then I'll go to them and says, look, I think we have an opportunity here. Let's go. And they'll say, yeah, it's a good opportunity. Most of the time they'll say, yeah, it's a good thing. Let's go. I've had a couple of, not often, one or two things where I say, George, you're getting crazy. Slow down. Which you have to respect that.
I guess Igor is good at delegating. He must have the right people.
I don't think he can delegate anything.
No, I do.
I know him personally. He's a control freak.
No, yes, but you have to delegate. You have to surround yourself with people that you can trust. Obviously, you cannot delegate the most important things. Some of that is so crucial yourself, but otherwise you cannot function. I think with many of the physicians nowadays don't want to be partners or don't want to do the work that is required to be partner. Some of them do want a title or some financial gains, either the lack of knowledge or the work that is needed to be a partner. With the model that I've created is that over the year, I'm very big into owning the property where each of our locations are. I realized early on that renting is never a good idea. The landlord has very little incentive to do any improvements. And then when you're renting, subconsciously, you have very little incentive to do improvements in your space as well, just because you figure it's not yours.
Right.
And when you do pediatrics, doing it for the long term. So owning your own space, I think, is so crucial if you're a pediatrician or a business owner. You may not be able to do it in the beginning, but as soon as you're able to afford it, I definitely encourage all the business owners to look and purchase their own space, whether it's a condo or a building, because you're building equity into something that you're going to be able to eventually cash out once you're ready to retire.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is another this conversation that Igor and I have all the time about this, where while I do agree with you, because we do own our original office, we do own it with the dentist and the rest of the partners. We moved out into a large space that there was no way you can own. You saw that office, Herb, in Comac.
Yeah, it's very large.
You could not buy that space. You could not even walk in to rent that space if you were not connected to some administrator or something that wanted pediatrics presence. And it's far nicer. I never showed you the call center, but that used to be our old office for 58 years. And indeed, it worked for 58 years. It probably should have been expanded many years ago, but we got landlocked when there was nowhere to go. And then we came up with the thought process of, why don't we work on the stuff that we're good at and leave the other stuff which you're not good at, like fixing toilets and electric going down, to somebody else. But money-wise, you are correct.
Yes. When you own the space, you build equity. So
You are correct. Yeah.
over the next 20, 30 years,
Yes, you are correct.
even if your real estate does not appreciate in value a single cent,
Mhm.
you would still have
Yes.
your mortgage paid out. And
You're correct.
eventually, you can recoup what you paid for. That's a nice
Yes, yes.
retirement nest.
Yes, you're correct.
It's the same argument as whether it's better to rent the house you live in or buy the house you live
Yes.
in. And hands down, for most people,
That's
buying
fine.
their house is a better deal.
Mhm.
The challenge in pediatrics is that pediatrics is a very strange specialty.
Mhm.
And some people buy a space that's too big and they go under because they can't manage the debt. Some people buy a space that's too small, and then they got to go rent because they need more space and they can't go too far away. And you never know what that's going to be. And as the neighborhood matures, which is just a life cycle, every neighborhood, the kids disappear. And in the big cities, at least, the younger families keep going further out and further out because housing is more affordable. So at some point, if you're growing a pediatric practice, you start having to move out to another neighborhood to get the new patients. So that's a lot to manage when you're talking about a 30, 40-year investment. But hands down, just financially, that's a better option for
Yeah.
any.
Correct.
It's
Not bad.
tricky, but it's hands down.
Yeah.
What I did find, and I'm curious if this is your experience too with hired physicians, is that when I had the urgent care center, nobody wanted to do an equity investment into it, physician-wise. And they weren't willing to go a month without a paycheck like partners do, simply because they were so burdened with student debt that the last thing they wanted to do was invest another penny in medicine. Do your physicians also express that?
To some extent.
What happened during COVID? Did they get their paychecks?
Yes.
But you
So-
didn't.
Yeah. So during COVID, we had to cut back our hours a bit where everything was shut down. But I think at that time we had 5 locations. So we actually, I'm sorry, 5, yes. Only one had to be temporarily shut down for a month. And then very quickly we're able to down telemedicine. We are already.
Who was the last guy to get a paycheck?
Me. Because
Yes.
correct. Obviously.
So you took the risk. You took the risk.
Of course, they are, as a business owner, there's always a risk. That's why you are the owner. The employees need to get paid first, and then you are the last one.
Yeah. I had an argument with some physicians where it was like shortly after they started to open up a little bit and it was getting better. And I was still scarred by COVID and how we had to adapt, and we didn't take paychecks, and we put people on vacation and did all these things, and we risked a lot.
Mhm.
This guy was a hospital employed physician. He says, man, COVID was the best thing for me. I stayed at home and I got my paycheck. And I got so angry with that mentality.
Yeah.
And I got into an argument with him, and my friend, who was a lifelong friend from medical school, got insulted because I insulted his friend in his house. And we got into a big tiff about this. The hospital employee, well, I'm the business owner, and I took a bullet. And then this guy sitting, yeah, I got my paycheck and everything's okay for me.
That wasn't true for a lot of employed physicians, though.
But that's coming around now.
Igor, and
Yes.
how many offices, how many physical locations do you have now?
So currently we have 8. We'll be opening up our 8th location this Thursday.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
And are all the 8 offices, are you an investor in the real estate?
Yes.
Or
I solely own every single.
all 8 practices function out of your real estate?
Correct. As well as the call center as well.
All right. And you've separated the call center to somewhere else?
Correct. So we have a
Centralized.
separate. So we have a separate building where we have staff whose only priority is to answer phone calls. I think it's one of those great ideas that
I may have whispered that idea to you a couple of
know.
years ago.
And I know. And I think as a business owner, whether you're solo or in a group, it's very important to get out of your comfort zone and go to conferences, whether it's practice management conference, whether educational conferences. I think it's so important to talk to people because the last thing that you want to do is become
complacent
and also think that you're, because you don't. And there are a lot of bright people out there who have better ideas than you do. So you have to listen to other people and you have to ask yourself, does that idea work for me? And can I make it better? During one of the conferences, I talked to George, and at that time we had noticed that there was very little incentive from the front desk staff to book extra appointments, because the more appointments to book, the more work it is for them, the more work it is for the front desk, the more work it is for the provider. And sometimes I felt like they would have been happy if you saw 5 patients a day or even
guaranteed
any patients a day, because their salary is not dependent on the volume of patients. And unfortunately, pediatrics is a volume-based business. People that tell you otherwise will fail. And during the conference that I went in Houston, I ran into several solo doctors who had significant financial difficulties. And when you ask how many patients you see a day, they're like 10, 12, 13 patients a day.
I get bored.
That's only that, but that you cannot survive in pediatrics. So what we did with our call center is we have it staffed with people whose only job is to make appointments. They have no disincentive not to book an appointment or else if somebody wants to be seen. So that has allowed our volume to stay steady and also allowed our practice to grow. Parents get very upset when call an office and nobody picks it up. Or they call an office.
Pediatric Executive Development System, or PEDS, is a dynamic, transformative program designed to accelerate the growth and development of the leaders in the field of pediatric entrepreneurship. PEDS takes a hands-on approach to problem solving, addressing real-time situations within your organization. More than a theoretical course, it is a practical platform that accelerates learning. Look at our link on the show notes for more information. I'm going to stop you there for a minute because the world's changing. You said something that is very interesting to me. Parents get very upset when they call and no one answers.
Yes.
How vital is that person answering that phone call, a human, not a decision tree, to the success of your empire?
I think it's crucial. And it doesn't have to necessarily be a phone call. We have texting as well, too. We realize that many parents like texting, and we encourage people to text us as much as possible because it is much easier for one person to answer multiple text messages at one time than to be on a phone call while the parent is thinking which day might be good for them to bring in their 6-month-old for a well visit.
Right.
So everybody expects nowadays good customer service. It's immediate service. So we really monitor the whole time of our patients on call. And
do you record the calls?
No, we do not.
Insurance?
We do not.
No.
But parents have so many options nowadays. So that if you don't pick up their phone call, especially if it's a new patient, they're going to call someone else or urgent care or a minute clinic. So you need to ask yourself, how much business are you losing by your front desk staff not answering phone calls in a timely fashion, or answering the phone call and saying, I'm sorry, we're busy. Why don't you come in tomorrow or the day after when your schedule actually could accommodate several more patients?
So from a business perspective, would you ever try to push all your patients into the patient portal or the texting only to schedule the appointments?
No, I wouldn't necessarily push them because there's some parents that do want to talk to a live human being. And I think if you make it too computerized, you lose that human touch. You have to give patients multiple options and you let them choose
They want, yeah.
which one works for them. I think some of the younger teenagers or young adults prefer texting. Some of the parents do want to talk to a human person.
Yeah.
And then I say to you, you're absolutely right. Every missed phone call is a missed dollar in your pocket. But I say it a different way. Every answered phone is the opportunity to make $150. You'd be silly not to answer the phone and not to give people different options like online scheduling, texting, sending a message to the portal so that you're meeting the customer where they're at. Someone at home freaked out over the kid's 103 fever, I don't think wants to go sign into a portal. But someone who's in a meeting, in a corporate board meeting, and the babysitter says, your son's got 103 fever, that person wants to text, say, kid's got 103 fever. I can't go to you now, but I can be there too. Can you fit me in? So I think the more options you give them, the more money you make.
And also availability as well too. Parents want evening hours, want weekend hours.
But doctors don't want that.
Of course. So sometimes you have to hire mid-level providers who are more enthusiastic about working evening or weekends to meet a demand. Because if you're not going to provide what your patients expect, they're going to go somewhere. Our busiest times, and I think afternoons and weekends, that's when everybody wants to be seen.
Saturday is the biggest day of the week.
We would love to have hours, but then probably we would lose 40, 50% of our value. We did that.
Right.
So you have to ask yourself what your parents, what your patients want from you. And they want availability. They want to have same-day access. And sometimes you have to stay later to see a kid whose mom called 10 minutes before closing time that the kid has an ear infection and screaming in pain and they want to be seen.
Yeah, but Dr. Igor, what about my work-life balance? It sounds like I don't want to work for you because you're old school.
It's irritating when somebody decides to walk once you got your bag ready to go home.
It's irritating.
It's irritating. There's no way around it. But Igor's absolutely right. We are in the service industry.
But that's how you get the positive reviews.
I understand.
Igor stayed an extra 10 minutes and saved.
No, they won't give you any credit for that.
Yeah, they do. For that, they do. They remember that they do.
We are in the customer service business. So the bars don't open at 9 in the morning because no one goes to get a beer at 9 in the morning. They open after for happy hour. And pediatrics has to be available when the parent's not working because children's bills get paid by the parents at work. And they don't have a lot of disposable income. So taking the afternoon off of work and losing out on money at work to come bring the kid to the pediatrician is a double injury, right? You're not making money and then you have to pay for the visit. So it's always been that way and it's never going to be different unless we become a socialist country and people get a minimal wage sent to their house for not working. That's just the way it is.
But Harp, I always ask myself what I would do if I was in a parent's shoes. And my practice administrator has the same philosophy as well. So pretend you're the parent, first-time parent, you have a child with 103 fever, you're nervous, you don't know what to do. What type of service would you expect from your pediatrician? And I think if you use that analogy, I think you're not going to go wrong.
But that's establishing a culture.
Yes.
Within the practice. Yes. And that culture develops and grows over time. Now, I want to ask you, how do you go about, like when you interview a doctor and you tell me these things and they'll tell you, I thought I'm going to work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, no call and go home at 4:00 because that's what I can get from the hospital.
Go to the hospital.
Yes, exactly. If you hire these types of providers, you're going to have a 9-to-5 practice. Sometimes you have to pass along a good candidate because their availability is not works for you.
Yeah.
Sometimes you might be desperate. You might have a provider that left or a provider that's out on medical leave. You need somebody to fill the shoes. But then if you hire somebody who only wants to work 9 to 5, that can create bad blood among existing providers. While is the new provider, you work 9 to 5, while we have evening and weekends. sometimes you have to pass a law to look for the right person that fits your organization.
Yeah. You know what I
So
wonder? I always wondered. So I hear the statement that the hospital has this or the qualified health center, it closes at 4 and no weekends. Do their patients not get sick on the weekends and evenings? Where do they go?
to the ER, and the hospital owns it.
But I thought that the idea was to reduce the spend.
Not as long as the hospital owns it. I don't care if I'm the hospital. I make more money when you come to the ER. Do well child exams on the qualified health center all day long, so I can meet the highest metrics for any quality incentives. Grow the panel so I can get the per month from the state of New York on the Medicaid, and then send them all to my ER, because then I get to charge them even higher, $1,200 for the viral panel.
Wow.
Love it.
It's a great
So
model.
It's a
Great
great
model
model
for spend.
for a spend. I'm going to get political again. That's what the Obama administration wanted. Full control of the big health systems. His dream was a bunch of Cleveland clinics, Mayo clinics that are totally, and Kaisers throughout the country. They totally control every aspect from the moment you are pregnant to the moment you die. And they just rake in the dollars because there's these huge machines, not any different than Verizon or Comcast or whatever your local cable provider is. They have a monopoly. They charge what they want. They give you the service they want. And if you don't want it, you don't have cable in your house and you don't have a cell phone. Bye.
But Herb, a lot of physicians who do work for a hospital group, they're not necessarily happier they are.
They're miserable.
I've interviewed quite a few of them, and they're having staffing shortages. They're understaffed with medical assistants. Their voice is not heard because the administration doesn't really care about what a pediatrician in a hospital clinic thinks. I've spoken to pediatricians that sold their practice for hospital groups, and
They hate it.
they hate it. Absolutely.
They hate it. To your point, in your practice, if one of your physicians stayed for half an hour to see an ear infection, you lost money, right? After closing, you lost money because seeing one patient doesn't cover the overhead of that doctor and that front desk person and that medical assistant. But you would probably say, thank you so much for doing that. That's what we like. You're doing a great job. If a physician is employed by Stanford and she meets somebody in the parking lot, and then at 5:15 p.m., she's going to get reprimanded, and human resources is going to come in and tell her that once the office is closed, she's not supposed to see patients. She's going to get in trouble for doing the right thing, for taking care of the patient, because it doesn't meet the need of the front desk people, the medical assistant, the administrator of the clinic, the boss of the administrator of the clinic. And so that's why they're miserable. Even when they do the right thing and don't ask to be compensated for waiting for the patient, they get slapped.
Yes.
That's no way to live. That's no way to be a doctor.
Correct.
That is the way to be Verizon or Comcast or whatever the monopolistic health system is around you, who just cares about squeezing every darn penny out of the customer and not about their journey or their health. So that's not right, but that's where they led us, and it's not been as successful as some people thought it would be. Igor, you're very much into relationships, even though you don't want to be partners.
Yes.
You like to be like I like to be. I like to eternally be. We don't have to get married. You say the relationships do matter quite a bit. They matter with your physicians, they matter with your patients, but they also matter with your local.
Yes, absolutely.
How do you foster your relationship with your bankers?
In the beginning, when I purchased my first office location, I had to get an SBA loan. And people tell you that they don't have resources or finances to purchase their first location is not accurate. Because with an SBA loan, the minimal requirements to get it are really negligible. So you can purchase your first office space as long as you've been in business for a couple of years and you have decent profit. You can purchase your first practice location, and you have. But after that, you need to go to your local bank. You need to introduce yourself to the manager, and the more business you give them, the more they get to know you, and the more they're willing to finance your future projects. So obviously, our first several purchases of our office locations was more challenging. But after a while, they have all your history. They know that you are doing things right. And they're more than happy to lend you the money to have you succeed.
Yeah.
Our last office location, we closed on our 7th office location in the middle of April of this year. 2 weeks later, a writer sends me a resume looking for a job. I look at her resume and she has a solo practice that she's planning to close and work for me. So the easiest thing for me to do would be to hire her as an employee, and that's it. But I looked at her resume and asked, why wasn't practice? Oh, I'm having financial difficulties. I cannot succeed as my own as a solo practitioner. I looked at her gross and I realized very quickly there is a potential for another office location. Obviously, she was renting. She was paying a lot of money for rent, crazy amount of money for rent, and start looking for a location within several miles from our current place to see where we can move practice. I find a location and I purchase it and I call my bank, and we were able to close on a commercial loan in 2 weeks.
Wow.
2 weeks.
Now, just out of curiosity, because you have a lot of cash flow, do you diversify? Do you have 2 or 3 banks or just one bank?
In terms of commercial mortgages, I stick with one bank because they have all my information. And it just, for bank accounts, we do have several. So that way, everything is FDIC insured. But in terms of getting mortgages, it's one bank.
Okay.
It's all about relationships. And once you get big enough, you don't work with a branch manager. You work with a vice president for healthcare at that division. So things can get done quickly. As I said, we closed in a commercial property north of $750,000. Closed it in 2 weeks. We were able to get everything done. Even the bank was surprised how quickly we were able to close.
And then starts the build out.
Do you get a little nervous when you take over one of these solo practitioners that is not doing well, that they're too stuck in their ways to be able to succeed?
So that's a good question. You have to interview them and see if their practice style is similar to yours. If the philosophy and the treatment style is similar, the practice will succeed. A lot of the times, some of the solo practitioners that join our group join us is because they don't want to manage the day-to-day operations. They're looking to do more clinical medicine and leave the management to someone else. Sometimes it's because they don't have the business skills to be able to manage operation. If you're not careful at your bottom line, if you are just not billing out claims correctly, it's very easy to make a business fail.
Yeah. Hold on 1 second. Do you bring these guys in under one tax ID number under Ivy League Pediatrics, or do you keep
Ivy Pediatrics? Yes, under one tax ID.
much better? Yeah.
Yes, under one tax ID. If a physician has a huge population of patients who refuse vaccines, obviously that's not a good fit for us. If they overprescribe antibiotics, that's not a good fit for us. You have to talk to them and see what's their practice style and whether it'll be a good fit for your group as a whole. We just anybody is interested in joining Ivy Pediatrics.
So basically those guys, they continue in their building and you just take over, but you have to have some exchange of some money.
Yes. most of the providers that joined our practice were renting. So we had to move their location to a new location that obviously we own. So we don't rent anymore.
Even at the beginning?
Even at the beginning. So let's say, George, you would approach me and say, George, I want to join Ivy Pediatrics for renting. I would start looking immediately within 2, 3, 4 mile radius of where you are to see if there is a medical condo or a medical building that can move your practice to. And chances are there are locations where you can move.
Well,
Sometimes a little bit more challenging, but finding an existing medical space that's already built out is a lot more economical than starting build out from scratch, because nowadays you're looking at 6 to 9 months worth of construction time.
Will the practices look alike or similar or seamless?
Oh, yes, the layout.
Yeah, the colors on the walls.
But in terms of the way they are organized, it's the same. Use the same computers, same filing system, same equipment. So that makes it simple.
And you have a lot of backups. You alluded that you travel with 2 laptops. Anything that's mission critical, you have at least 1, if not 2 backups? Correct.
You never would have been in a situation where your laptop fails. I always travel with 2 laptops, a hotspot as well. And fortunately nowadays you can get good reception pretty much anywhere. One of the things I learned, Herb, is you need to have backup. I think a lot of providers do not invest in their equipment that they're using. For example, we know that without a fridge, we cannot do any well visits. If a fridge fails, good luck getting a scientific fridge within 2 or 3 weeks. It's almost impossible. So each of our offices has scientific quality fridge and freezer for backup. So in case something happens, we just move the vaccines from one fridge to another. Many times it's not being used. It's just there maybe for overflow vaccines, get a flu vaccine in the fall, but each office has 2 fridges because we realized that no fridge means no well visits or no shot visits, and that would be problematic.
So that's one of the advantages of having the cash flow that you have.
It's also
Yes, but if I'm a solo practitioner grossing $700,000 a year, I'm taking a salary, but there's not a lot of extra for these backups. But when you multiply that times 20 and maybe a little more because it's more efficient, then there's money for these backups, which allow you to be prepared for things that are unexpected, but that do happen. So you have generators, backup refrigerators. You can also shift around, right? If whatever reason, one office is short in varicella vaccines this morning, you personally yourself can drive from one office to the other and deliver the vaccine so they can keep seeing patients. Which if I'm a solo practitioner, I got to call Henry Schein and wait for them to process it. And if it takes a week, it takes a week. I can't see 12-month-old visits.
Yeah. You know what? I think I finally figured out Igor's financial model.
It's
actually pretty smart.
Yeah.
So he gets a practice that whether it's good or whether it's bad, it will generate income and probably be self-sufficient. He has the infrastructure and the knowledge on how to manage this.
Yes.
So he buys the building. The practice basically pays the mortgage over time.
Correct.
Then the doctors are working and everybody's getting paid. He's providing work for people. So he's doing a good social thing. And at the end of the day, there's some extra money. That's even better.
Yes.
And then in 20 years, all these things get refinanced and remortgaged. And heck, my father made all his money from real estate.
Yes.
It's the McDonald's model. You don't make profit by selling burgers. You make a profit by owning the land where the burger is being cooked.
That's smart.
It's very smart.
Yeah.
Correct. So when you're purchasing a practice that is underperforming, your goal is to break even. And even in practices where I thought, oh my God, it's going to take many years to build it up. If you're providing good service and you're available within a year or two,
it makes money.
It makes money because there are always going to be kids, always going to be They're always going to be getting sick. So if you're providing good service, the practice will grow. And I think that's why it's so important to provide good customer service, because we all know that a happy patient maybe will tell a few of their friends,
Right.
and a happy one will tell their whole neighborhood.
Yes. Now, I wonder, do you, as Dr. Igor, do you have a home base, a patient panel, a schedule every day?
So I don't work every day. I try to put myself on the schedule once or twice a week. Sometimes like 3-4 days a week if somebody's out.
That's the next question.
Sick. So you do have to cover. If I'm not working and somebody called out sick last minute, I'm not going to have that office closed and reschedule a patient. I'll actually go to that location and work that shift, which is good because I'm making sure that everybody's functioning the way I expect that location to function. So I don't look at it as a negative way when I have to go and cover last minute. I look at it as an opportunity to see how is the office operating, what tweak, what adjustments need to be made so that it works better.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
And then you also say that one of the key critical mission things for you is to be a voice over IP.
Correct. Several years ago, we decided to go with voice over IP because when you have regular landlines, you're limited by the number of phone calls you can get at one time.
Right.
So if you have 5 lines, at most you can get 5 people calling at the same time. With voice over IP, you can have 1 line and 1,000 people calling at the same time, and they're not going to get a busy signal. Also, what voice over IP allows us to do is that, yes, we have a call center, but many times the call center cannot answer every single phone call that arrives. So when that happens, the phone calls bounce to all our office locations, and we expect our staff there to pick up the phones. So yes, we have 8 office locations, but ultimately it's one practice. And there's no reason why location number 7 cannot answer any questions or make an appointment for location number 1 or location number 2, or create a referral or send a message to the provider to refill a medication. So this is how you utilize technology in making sure that you provide good customer service.
I think that's the difference between a big system and an independent operation, because he thinks how to make the life better of the physician that's working or the practice people. Whereas at a hospital system is so bloated that they just make life more complicated. You know how many people come to us because they can't get through the first phone call to make an appointment?
Or nobody picks up.
Or you get the orthopedist. They all use the same, but they have a call center too. But it's next to impossible to get appointments.
So you utilize technology to your benefit and making sure that provide good customer service. All our offices have their own phone number, local, that patients have been used to. I make sure that I get the phone number that the parents are used to calling for years. We get it text enabled so parents can text us. Obviously, we have a portal where patients can request appointments or refills or referrals. So you utilize technology. Speaking of technology, we also have backup computers in our business office. So let's say one of our computers fails today. We're not going to be in a situation where that room is not functional. My business manager will just go pick up a computer, drive it to the office, and swap it. So that way we have as little downtime as possible.
Right.
We also have hotspots in each of our office locations as well too. So the remote chance we lose internet, we have Wi-Fi backup. So at least we can connect a few of the computers. We are cloud-based in Mars. It's important for us to be able to access our system.
Yeah, the cloud base is good. What EMR do you have?
Office Practice.
Oh, that's right. Office Practice. I forgot.
We are starting
It's a good product. We have the same one.
We're also starting to get generators for each of our office locations. So at least for the critical ones. So our call center is on generators. So that is our nerve center. It has also 2 different internet providers in case one fails, automatic, failover. Phone calls can always get answered appointments can be made.
Yeah, but you have to be careful with these things, with all these accounts and all these bills. They
Yes.
start to blend and you don't even see them anymore. And you pay for phone line. I remember when we did our consolidation of phone lines, when we did the call center and we moved numbers, I found phone lines that were in the wall that we were paying for 15 years that nobody knew about.
But we use internet, so we use
Yeah.
voice over IP.
Yeah.
So,
But you still have phone numbers.
but now voice over
Yeah.
IPs. I try to calculate the cost if we lost internet for one day in our call center.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, the phone calls would bounce each of the office location, but how many of them will get answered?
No, it's
You
very
know,
important.
And how frustrated will our parents be that had to wait an hour or an hour and a half to get the phone calls answered?
Yeah.
So unfortunately, in business, you do have to make hard decisions, and
Yeah.
Right.
you have to invest in your infrastructure.
That's more important than anything.
I think that's the biggest advantage of your model is you can invest in the infrastructure. A smaller practice doesn't have the finances to do that. And then they do get into the disaster where a computer doesn't work. They have to close down a room and lose the revenue from the room.
Igor's 8 smaller practices.
Yes.
Yeah,
He
but
proved it to work.
Yes.
What's the difference? His brain. That's all.
Yeah.
he's willing to work
He's
hard.
willing to work, his connections, his risk tolerance, because he's going to put out money to get that extra computer, as opposed, how many people have Windows 95?
Yes.
Yes. Or a little laptop in the room. That's just so
Yeah.
frustrating.
Yeah, and you need a hard station, hardwired everything.
Or even scarier is using a regular residential fridge to store your vaccines.
Yeah.
Storing $50,000 worth of products
Mhm.
in a little $400 fridge that you bought at Home
Right.
Depot, and you're using data loggers that don't communicate through Wi-Fi or phones to let you know what's happening with vaccines.
Yeah.
So now I have a big question for you. How is
Yes.
your work-life balance?
Actually pretty good nowadays.
You don't see patients like me, so it should
No,
be easy. I know.
I do. What is sometimes frustrating is when you're seeing patients, you still have to deal with the business aspect of medicine. So
Right.
your phone is constantly vibrating messages, and okay, let me quickly look at them, but I'll respond to them during lunchtime or afterwards. But it's challenging. Yes, the work-life balance sometimes can blend because you can never truly go away on vacation and think about your practice.
That's true. That's true of any business owner.
Correct.
If you're the CEO of Apple, you're on vacation, you're worrying about this, you're worrying about that. That comes with the territory. You want to be the boss. Life doesn't stop. But if you don't want to, you can just go get a job.
Yeah. So
Yes.
that's where having good partners comes in, I think.
Yes.
Because like I've watched you at conferences, you're constantly at the office texting. I'm paying attention, but I got my partners back in the office. You know?
Well,
But it's the same thing at the end of the day.
but yeah, so different strokes for different people.
Yep, different model.
Well, Igor, this is very enlightening. I'm
Yeah.
very delighted at your success.
Well,
And
He has one last question before he goes. What advice would you give to a new graduate in terms of private practice and the future, other than coming to work for you?
Again, if I had to start over again, what I would do is I would find a solo doctor, work for them several years, learn about the business aspect of medicine, and then eventually take over their practice, because there are still many solo doctors that don't know what to do with their practice. They might be within a few years of retirement and nobody wants to take over their practice. Yeah. Some of them are forced to either close the practice. We've had several practices that reached out to us and say, can you please take over my practice? Obviously, by that time, the practice was so small that it wasn't worth it for us to open another location. So we had to absorb their patients or their charts. But the biggest fear of a solo practitioner is what to do with their practice when they're ready to retire. Reach out to the community. I think it's so important to get to know the solo practitioners. If you want to go into private practice, is find someone that has similar philosophy, work for them for a few years. Yes, you can purchase the practice from them, or sometimes they might just give it for free. You might just work for a few years, get some sweat equity into it, and they'll be more than happy to leave you their practice and legacy.
It's better than closing it down, right?
Yes, correct. And that actually,
It's happening more and more.
Yeah.
People they didn't plan right, and
Yeah.
they can't find someone to replace them. Thank you so much for your time, Igor. It's great to
thank
see
you,
you.
Howard. Thank you, George.
Hopefully we'll see each other somewhere soon in
Absolutely.
person.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Thank
All
you.
right. Great to
Okay.
see you. Thanks for your
Bye.
time. Thank you for listening. This has been a production of the Pediatric Lounge. On the show notes, you will find links to our co-host and other important notes, as well as a timetable of the topics discussed today. Don't forget to follow us on social media and subscribe to wherever you listen to your podcast. Leave us a great review, as it helps us greatly. In the meantime, we will see you next week. The Pediatric Lounge. The conversations are not intended as medical advice, and the opinions expressed are solely those of the host and the guest.